In 1981, 14-year-old me saw Excalibur in the theater with my dad, and that movie viewing began a lifelong obsession of armor for me. I've talked about that many times. What I might not have mentioned is that my dad, in helping to foment that love of armor that was burgeoning in me, took me into New York City to the Metropolitan Museum of Art to see their incredible collection of armor. And now, here in 2019, I am back at the Met for a special exhibition they've just put up called The Last Knight. And it is a new look, an incredible exhibition looking at the history of arms and armor and the theatricality of that through the lens of the last knight, the Emperor Maximilian. The curator is about to take me on a detailed tour through this exhibit, and I can't wait. So Pierre, would you like to walk me through this?
Sure, with great pleasure. We are entering here the first gallery, which is introducing Maximilian as a very young man, an 18-year-old, in a country where he doesn't speak the language. He's coming to power in the Low Countries, today's Netherlands, Belgium, and other France, Luxembourg. And when he arrives, he has not much to offer. He's marrying the princess, the heiress of the land, Mary of Burgundy. And he has a lot of enthusiasm and no experience, no money of his own, not really troops either, but the land is under attack of the King of France. So this is his first challenge, is how is he going to defend his wife's inheritance, especially when he's an outsider. And part of his resolution is to inspire the local nobility to serve him, to serve alongside.
The outward, to give them something to latch on to.
To give them a role model, to say, actually, we have the same value, except that I may carry them even better than you do. And so it's the idea that he's one of them, but he may be the right leader because he's superlative in how he does it. And the armor is the way that he's messaging that.
And it's this, so this piece, the front piece of the exhibition, I've looked at pictures of this thousands of times, and I had no idea how svelte and tiny. It's almost like a piece of jewelry.
It was meant to be a piece of jewelry. It's an armor for battle. I have no doubt that this armor was actually used in battle.
It was?
It was. Maximilian fought his first battle in 1479 on foot, meaning he is making the point that he would not be able to escape, risking capture or risking being killed, to motivate his troops. And a year later, he was still fighting the French who were encroaching on the Burgundian Netherlands. And he commissioned this armor in Augsburg in Germany, and it was delivered to him, and we have a picture showing him entering a city in his own lands, riding in what appears to be this very armor.
Wow.
It's an over-the-top armor.
It really
and he
is.
had it made for the very purpose of showing that he had potentially all unlimited wealth, that he was actually a German, but a very capable one. Within the context of the Low Countries.
It's the edge detail, this gold, actual separately made edge detail around it's so unique. I've never seen that before.
It was the fashion in the 15th century in some lands, but there are very few armors that survive that have that. The articulation of the gauntlets of the legs is exquisite. The pierced work. All these ribs, all this fluting, it was an armor that's designed to impress. And we found the payment for it, and so we know how expensive it really was. It was part of a larger group of things.
Wow! How much did it cost?
You could buy a townhouse. You could buy a townhouse instead of this armor.
A New York townhouse?
You could buy a New York townhouse for this armor.
So in the tens of millions?
I would go about halfway.
Okay.
Halfway. It depends on what neighborhood.
Wow.
What is also interesting with this armor is that his helmet became separated from the rest of the armor. This is the first time in decades that we're able to reunite the helmet with the armor.
Wow. So actually, the other part of walking through this exhibit that amazes me is the idea of all the places these pieces come from. I mean, does this travel in a box with someone handcuffed to it? You can't just ship this thing.
There, some of them are shipped almost as a Lego kit. They're completely disassembled and they need to be put together. And that's how they would have been shipped in the Middle Ages. And others come more as a fully assembled figure, as a statue, so to speak.
Okay.
And then you just pull them out of their crates.
Is this the first suit of armor he really wore?
It's the first one that survives.
Okay.
He already had some. I found a payment when he was 13-year-old. He already had one. He clearly had many, but this one was kept in part because it was worn in triumph, and it was a memento of the fact that he had succeeded in repelling the invasion.
Amazing.
So, this gallery is about how Maximilian expands the arena of his messaging. Mm-hmm. He looks fabulous here in triumph, coming after a battle into a town. But the tournament is the place where more people can see just what he's made of.
Right.
So all of these armors were commissioned to show his skills, his ability to ride as a horseman.
And he
also
competed. He competed and got injured in...
He competed all the time. He was constantly injured. He competed till the end. He was an avid hunter. He really liked jousting too. It was. We have reports from ambassadors says nothing gets done here. Is always jousting. We've been waiting for an opportunity to meet with him.
And this is one of his jousting.
This is one of his jousting armors. So this is for the so-called joust of war. That is, it's supposed to look like a reenactment of war, and the lances have this very pointed structure. How massive they are makes you think of what it is like when you have a horse galloping, and being struck. These are three examples of the types of heads that would be mounted on these lances.
God.
So they're
terrifying.
They're terrifying. No, they're absolutely terrifying.
And the goal wasn't to kill each other.
No, but these have the power to pierce everything.
Yeah.
So these shields, they're so wrapped on the armor, they actually have metal parts too. And then the goal was to either splinter the lance or to throw the other knight off the horse.
So what is this? I haven't seen this kind of thing before. This giant plate on the left side.
Yeah. So basically, you have a target. Mm-hmm. There it is.
So so it's a pocket.
So it's a receptacle almost to take the impact. Uh-huh. However, you even have a better target, which is the head. If you look at the head, there are two plates on the forehead, on the brow. Those are designed to fly off when they get hit. There's a little staple, the brass staple holding them down.
Yeah.
So it's fine to aim at the head. And when you see what these look like, you have to imagine the shocks, which is why the chin is bolted in place. This whole thing is creating a safety distance.
Oh, so that the knight here doesn't get his head torn off.
That's correct, right. So they break the neck.
So the two halves would fly off when they got hit. This is like pro wrestling. There's a theater to it.
The theater is everywhere. There's a lot of drama. Maximilian was not just content with doing the conventional things. Mm-hmm, he's actually imagining new kinds of tournament that will be more spectacular, and we have some artifacts that speak to that.
Now, I'm assuming that this would be the horse armor that went with this jousting armor?
Yes,
and
I mean,
is that rare?
You blind the horse.
You blind the horse, so that was going to ask about
so that the horse doesn't deviate. This is a kind of joust where you don't have a tilt, you don't have a fence separating the participants.
Okay.
So there's the possibility, because it must look like war. Mm-hmm, so it's in an open field. So the horses will be scared of colliding, so it's easier to blind them. And then they're especially trained to run blindly. Wow. So it's not your typical war horse. You have to rent them, or you have to own them.
Noticed the eyes were covered.
So they're covered. They're just represented in bluing. And sometimes the horses did collide, and sometimes the horses were killed, and the riders themselves. So it was a friendly combat, but it was very dangerous. we have examples of that.
So I've never seen anything like this, and then I look here, and these are the only three surviving examples?
That's correct.
So what are these? I've never imagined such a thing.
So they don't look like your typical breastplate of an armor because they have all this open work. They're not really covering the entire chest, and they're designed to just carry a shield in the front. That is the target in these tournaments. What's so fascinating is they're full of spring-loaded mechanisms. They're designed to eject the shield in the air. So if the shield is struck, the shield is released, flies off above the head, and some shields were designed to be covered with like the slices of a pie, with little plates, and then they disperse in the air like fireworks.
And again, this is like the theater of the victory. You get to see the opponent.
It's a bit like paintball. It will say you're hit, you're not dead, but you're clearly lost. They're all different. They don't have quite the same mechanism. They were not made by the same people.
But they're all clearly mature examples of the technology.
They're not prototypes. They're
Yeah.
quite mature. And so interestingly, all of them are missing something. So there's a lot of brainstorming about what was actually the operating principle.
Oh, okay. I'm going to take lots of pictures of these because I seriously would love to build and test one and try it out.
I would love for that to happen.
It makes me feel so close to them, the idea of all this ingenuity going towards the theater of battle just for the audience to see. I mean, for some reason that bridges this the centuries that divide us, it makes me understand this a little more.
Great. Well, it's so easy to think of arms and armor as something military. This is a different field. This is a kind of spectacle. It's entertainment, it's practicing, honing one's skills. And the account books of Maximilian, he didn't know I would have access to them. But for this research, I actually went and saw who he was paying and what they were doing for him. It looks like it's clockmakers who were helping making these devices. So it's not just the armorers collaborating with the mechanical geniuses of the time.
Yeah.
Who therefore came with different solutions to the same practical problem of ejecting a shield.
Amazing. Are there times when you have a piece in front of you and you are able to start to recognize the work of specific shops or specific artisans?
Typically, the frustrating part here is we can't. It is also interesting that there are none before Maximilian's time and there are none after his time.
Really?
So it's clearly correlated with him.
Right,
and there's a letter to a confidant that he wrote when he was still very much a young man. I think he was maybe 21. And he's writing and he says, I have dreamed of new games. So he may not have had a hand in the design, but he may certainly have, I think, encouraged the clockmakers and the armorers to come up with something fresh, something exciting.
That's great. Can we talk about these
two
beautiful pieces? These are meant to be fought on foot, or are these part of games?
These are probably the closest thing to a tank that you would see in this exhibition. They're so massive.
They really are.
They leave virtually no opening. They're shown back to back, but almost like in an English duel in the 19th century, walking away. The story is the one covered in gold belonged to Maximilian, was made for him, and the one that is here is a trophy that he kept. This belonged to a Burgundian knight called Claude de Vaudreuil, who was an older man at the time, somebody who had fought everywhere, was on Maximilian's side, and was virtually undefeated in any form of combat. He was really one of the superstars of his age. Also at war had illustrated himself. And it looks like this armor is not homogeneous. It looks like he handpicked the pieces that he liked the most.
Oh, fascinating.
This is an armor that is all Italian, but the pieces don't quite go together. And I think we know there was a master of arms, an instructor of how you can fight, who said there are 3 people in Europe at the time who really knew their stuff. And he's mentioned as one having a phenomenal armory, who has done metallurgical investigations, and this is his armor. When he challenged Maximilian, he said, I'm here to fight the premier king of the world. It's you, of course. And Maximilian tried to elude the combat. He was not comfortable, even though I think he was about 60 at the time and Maximilian was in his 20s.
Oh, wow.
And he nevertheless, Maximilian feared the shame of being overpowered in public by this man. Either he had the elegance of losing, or Maximilian actually had the vitality to overcome him. But then he kept the armor as a memento. He kept the armor as a memento, and so it's showing, it's making the point that armor, beyond its functionality, was also kept as a way of telling stories, great deeds, a bit as a commemorative monument.
When you say you can tell the pieces don't exactly go together, what are the witness marks, or what are the things that tell you that?
This armor actually has Italian marks, and Italian armor making is always very confusing because they didn't have as many guild regulations as in Germany.
Okay.
So what you have is a general contractor who undertakes to make an armor and can make the armor, but doesn't need to. Will find then specific people to just make the legs or make the arms.
Okay.
And it appears that usually the general contractor stamps his mark above everybody else's, and the subcontractors have their own marks. But there is something that ties them together, which is this general contractor's mark.
Yeah.
Here, it's really a mixture. You don't have that thing. So it looks like it's all Italian, but mixed and matched by Vaudreuil, because that's what he thought was going to be the most effective.
How thrilling. Can we talk about these amazing pieces?
Yes. So The tournament is a spectacle. There's no spectacle without an audience. And Maximilian was married twice in his life. For his second wife, he built this. He lived in the Low Countries at the beginning of his reign, and then he moved to Innsbruck around 1490. And he inherited a palace that he sort of expanded. And he built a loggia to look down at the main square where all the tournaments were being disputed, which is why this is here. He's looking at his own spectacle. He's looking at his own game.
Yeah.
He's represented here with his current wife that is holding a golden apple, which is the prize for the tournament. And his former wife, the deceased, is on the side.
Would that have been much brighter back in the day?
It would have been brighter. As far as we know, it's likely there was more white and with very bright highlights, and now it's more muted.
So the golden apple might have been actually gilded.
It would have been very strong,
shiny,
very striking, absolutely. Right. And interestingly enough, he's then surrounding by all these dancers, and these dancers are doing these contortions. It's a very particular kind of dance. But they're not professional dancers, they're his courtiers. And if you jousted, you had to dance afterwards. Maximilian, you're not done after you fell off your horse, or you have to go back in, have a banquet, and late at night you do all the dancing. And so some of them have coats of arms on their clothing, and we can tell that's just part of the expectations. Maximilian himself loved dancing. So the tournament is part of a very large festive program. Sometimes it lasts several days, and the dancing here dominates the scene. And so there's quite a bit of it. And below we have his coat of arms. There are things he had, but interestingly enough, there are also things that he wanted. They're claims.
So it's aspirational.
They're aspirational. So you have Hungary, for example, represented on the top left.
Okay.
And he had the right to claim Hungary. He had made a deal with the King of Hungary that he said, we're going to have our children intermarry, and whoever has a male heir will, if their offspring is a male, and the other one branch dies out, that one gets to keep Hungary. And so, as part of the deal, he got the right to bear the title of King of Hungary, even though he didn't go there. Right. And so we have here all this art shown, articulated.
And am I right, these have never traveled before?
These, as far as I know, have never even been shown outside of the city.
Wow.
They were part of the building until the 1960s, then removed for safety, replaced by replicas, and they've stayed in a museum. And it's quite an extraordinary historical event that they would go abroad and that they could be shown here. I think they're highly relevant. They show that even when Maximilian was not watching his tournaments, because he staged many from the loggia, he's still here. He's actually represented. He could have one of his representatives, and he's there, part of the composition.
A person feels like they're starting to emerge out of all of these artifacts.
Do you mean a character?
Yeah, the character.
Oh, the character is going to emerge even more if you look at the drawings. It was not enough to participate in tournaments to be seen. It was more important for people to know about that he had done those things. So he invented the alter egos. He wrote several autobiographical works. They're about him, but he has a different name. However, everybody that is this alter ego meets is a real person that Maximilian knew. So this is the story of a knight who has to fight countless opponents and also enter into dancing competitions and will earn the hand of the bride at the end of the day. And Maximilian is called Freidal and all of these, but all of the opponents are actual people that he jousted against. There are 256 of these scenes. These are the sketches that were reviewed, and then the ones that he reviewed and he rejected.
Oh my goodness!
He said, "This is wrong. It's the other way around. I was him, and he was there." And so, then there were deluxe version made in miniature, and then the ambition was to make a print version for everybody to have access to it. And you have one of the versions by Dürer here, where you see the sketch, and then the print version.
Oh my goodness! So you get to see a Dürer workshop.
The Dürer adaptation of the original sketch. Wow. And interestingly enough, Maximilian was constantly running out of money. So only 5 of these woodcuts were made out of the 256 illustrations. So this is one of these many unfinished projects. He saw too big. And we have what he dictated to his secretaries. So say Freidal, him, struck, which means it's fine for him to lose. He's shown him as a loser. Amazing. What was important is that he tried, he's fearless, he lost. So he say, and then he describes the opponent, what color he had on, what the color of the lion in his head was, and so forth. doing very close copy editing,
Yeah.
reviewing all the designs, making sure that they were to his liking. And if talking about a character, he was the same with armor.
Yeah.
He was micromanaging the work of his armors, telling them how to do things.
This is such a beautiful thing. You get a sense of the industry, of the art director and the execution of the. It's really incredible to see these two side by side.
And that's what makes him an emperor, because to get Dürer to do this, he probably used gentle persuasion.
Amazing. Yeah.
So this is the exhibition is going to talk about what Maximilian wanted in life,
right,
and how he tried to get it. At some point, it's exasperating to be always in Maximilian's head, and this is a moment of where we can breathe, and we're in the presence of the many armorers who work for him. So this room is all about the different armorers who work for him, their styles, the places where they lived. We have a bit of a social history in the middle, talking about the ones who were never paid, about the ones who were ennobled, about the ones that he moved around.
Well, so I guess I tend to think that a king would have his armor shop, but you're describing a whole industry that supports the...
Oh, there are a lot of freelancers.
Okay.
He needs more than the people in his service can deliver. He creates his own workshop in Innsbruck, and then he keeps hiring people, but his finance officer says that's too many people. We can't find the resources to pay all these people.
Yeah.
And he doesn't look at how many armors he's already commissioned, because he's giving them away. He's giving them as gifts.
Oh my goodness.
As diplomatic gifts. So there are lots of armors that are not for him,
right,
but he needed them anyway. And we have some in the exhibition, like this one over there.
This one is...
This one. Another completely enclosed armor. If you look at these little pieces on the face defense,
yeah,
they can activate little shutters.
So
that you can have air, but if you want to
goodness.
close the vents, you can actually shut them, so that no edge weapon can go in there.
I'm quite surprised. The lames of the articulation seem much thinner than I expect them to be.
They're very light in this particular instance. It is a curious armor. It's designed for the foot combat, just like the ones we looked at. It's the more modern version because it has a trunk rather than a sort of bell-shaped skirt.
Okay.
It's very cleverly articulated. It basically functions like a musical instrument. The arms are designed to slide inside the shoulders.
Oh, like
and the legs, it's telescopic. The legs are designed to slide. They can stretch more than a human body can. So the idea of any extension, and the armor is not any impediment, because it will go that far. Unfortunately, over time, the arms have gotten out of the shoulders, which right now, if you look at the proportion, there's a little something off.
Yeah.
Whereas the legs can still go in and out of the trunks. So the proportions are not quite what the armor would have looked like in its original state.
And who was this made for? Was this used in battle?
So this was made for the tournament. And it was made for Giuliano de' Medici, who was the younger brother of the Pope at the time. And the contemporary says he was rather uninterested in warfare, not really interested in physical exercise, preferred books. So it's a sort of bit odd, but as the head of the secular head of the Medici family, he had to have armor.
Right.
And we don't believe he ever used it.
Wow.
This was made for him, sent to him as a present, and it just probably stayed in the wardrobe.
Amazing.
So
I would have put it on the moment it arrived. This particularly thrilled me, seeing these armor tools.
Well, I'm very glad.
Are these from specific workshops that Maximilian worked with?
No,
Okay.
these are not historical tools in that sense. These come from our department.
Okay.
We have hundreds and hundreds of tools, because when our department was founded in 1912, we already had an honorary curator of arms and armor, and he came from the field of zoology and natural sciences. He was a curator of fishes at the Natural History Museum across the park.
Sure.
He was also a professor at Columbia University, and he became the first curator of arms and armor at the Met. And he came from the idea that if you were to display a dinosaur and you were missing one leg, if the visitors might think dinosaurs only had 3 legs. So you would make a cast, a plaster cast, and then you would make the 4th leg. He believed that if an armor was missing an arm, the arm should be made. So we have a smithy in our department, and he hired in Europe armorers who would be able to reconstruct the missing pieces. And some of the armors we have on display, and it's explained on the label, have a new helmet that was made here at the Met, in the workshop. Generations of craftsmen came from Germany, from France, and they trained American ones. And to this day, we still make pieces. We always disclose that.
Yeah, yeah.
But we have therefore hundreds of tools that now we have accession. They're part of our collection. But we still use them. So here we took a selection of tools from these generations of people who work at the Met to both call attention to the fact that it's an ongoing story, but also they're very conventional. They look exactly like what you would have seen in the iconography of the time.
I have hammers and stakes similar to this in my own shop that I use on a regular basis. I love these helmets. This particular, this duck face.
It's very massive. It's very powerful. They're side by side to show first of all what happens over 2 decades, the change of style.
Which is the earlier one?
This is the earlier one.
Okay.
This is an invention. This combines a chin piece with the top, with the skull defense. Normally at the time there would have been separate pieces, so it's kind of a combination. And it's also the work of one armor that was in Maximilian's service, called Lorenz Helmschmied. And the other one is either made by Lorenz 25 years later, working in a new fashion, or made by his son, who was working in his workshop, and was hired by Maximilian. So Maximilian, he lived long enough to hire 2 generations of father and son. Both of them became his court armorers, and this is unsigned. And since the son was so closely involved in his father's workshop, it's not always possible unless there's a stamp to tell whether we're in the presence of the son or the father's work.
I have never seen such large-scale chasing relief done on armor.
You're a creator of arms and armor. I can tell because this is what sets this one apart from everything else. Horse armor was often made of boiled leather. It was very hard. It was enough.
Yeah.
And then
because it's for glancing blows. No one's trying to stab the horses.
And then you have a version that is metal, but then it typically has holes to attach fabric to it. So it's just a foundation. It's just a base.
Okay.
This one clearly was not meant to be covered with anything else. It was meant to be seen in its current state. So it's embossed. Like all this work, all this tooling is not very sophisticated necessarily in how perfectly done it is. However, it's very bold. It's really meant to be seen from afar. The whole surface is stippled. Somebody went with a punch, and it's completely engraved. Maybe you can see it on the borders.
Oh yes.
The emblems. There's these little triangles. The entire surface is covered with little spiral dots. We actually know the person who did this. It was a goldsmith in Brussels.
And what was the purpose?
The purpose was to give tack to the silver foil and the gold that was all over the surface. When this armor was in its original state, it was like a mirror. It was completely silvered. There are traces of the silver, but over the centuries, it has lost a great deal. You can see the silver here.
Oh, yes.
There's silver there. And there's still traces of the gold that would have been over all the fruits, all the pomegranates, all the branches.
Oh, my goodness.
So it was a very spectacular armor. And it's here because it's probably the only armor in the show that must have been made for Maximilian or his son, but that was regifted. It was gifted to Henry VIII.
Ah, really?
So this was more maybe after a rugby match when they exchanged shirts.
Yeah.
At some time, in some encounter, they exchanged horses, or they were in exchanges of gifts. They said, "Why don't you take my horse and my armor?"
So this next room that we're about to approach, I'm really, really excited about.
Tell me which.
It's child armor.
Yes.
It seems so decadent. And so crazy to make an unbelievable breastplate like this for a 9-year-old? Is that 7 years old?
I think about 7 based on the dimensions.
Yeah.
This is about Maximilian as a head of a family. So he's providing for his children. He wants his children and grandchildren to succeed. He wants them to mirror his own image, but he also wants them to find the right brides. And they married children in those days.
Right.
So from the beginning, it's a question of, is my child worthy of attention? In this instance, there's the collar of the Order of the Golden Fleece etched and gilded.
Oh, the color, that's okay, yeah.
And that's very important because he's the only child in that order. It's meant for grown-up men who have demonstrated what they're made of. This is a child, but he's the crown prince. He has to take over one day on behalf of Maximilian for the Low Countries. So he's the only one who gets to be in the order. This is the first armor where the chain, which members had to wear every day, doesn't need to be worn anymore because it's already there. It's already represented. So if you have it on the armor, you don't need to have it bouncing on the metal as you ride your horse.
Of course.
And this is an equestrian armor. So it was meant for, with the lance rest,
Right.
it was meant for practice. It's clear that this boy was not just wearing it for a ceremony, he was actually riding horses and using a lance.
Oh.
So yeah, this is a world of teenagers. We have Maximilian's son here, and then we have he had 2 grandsons. This is one of them. What we see on the breastplate is clearly an imitation of the costume at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's bulging and has the slits as they would have had in the shirts.
Right.
But then other parts are treated differently, and I think they were just meant to look like this. It's a fashion statement. This is, it looks a bit like a costume. It has the shoulder defenses of an armor for battle.
Right.
But all these ribs are, and what you see on the thighs, sagging.
Yeah.
That's describing a kind of leg wear.
Right,
that,
right.
would be fashionable.
So it's replicating cloth.
It's replicating cloth and metal, and this is the only unfinished armor in the exhibition.
Oh, really?
This is why it's brown and blue. This is why you don't see any etching or any decoration. They stopped working on it.
How come?
Two possibilities.
Yeah.
This child was going too fast, and by the time they were about to finish it, they realized it will not fit anymore.
We were wondering about that. Once you measure a kid for armor, it's going to take a period of time.
It takes a period of time, and the other possibility, which is I think more likely, is that the armor was not being paid anymore, and he just said, "Well, why do I continue?"
Well, speaking of replicating cloth, this skirt is so demonstrative. It's incredible.
It is the same kind of technique, right?
Yeah.
It's like we say gadrooned. When you raise the metal and it has this sort of a semicircular shape, and obviously it had a panel in the front and back, so you could ride. You looked like a skirt when you were walking,
right?
But when you got on the horse,
you could still
sit on the saddle comfortably.
Is that black fabric underneath?
It's velvet. That's replaced, but that was originally there. We know it from the payment records, and then it's covered with plates of silver. Then there is gilt.
Amazing.
Very exquisite armor.
And again, the internal names on the inside of the arms. Did that also telescope? It
does, and then the shoulders are also very unusual. They overlap the torso. You can do full rotation of the arm. They have to look like short sleeves. They should not look like armor. Interesting also is this little loop in the front on the skirt.
Yes.
It was designed so you could suspend your sword. You didn't have to wear belts that would interfere with the experience. So you could just use these clips, basically. Just clip on your sword.
That seems so convenient. I'm surprised I haven't seen more of that.
They should have done more. It became a standard fixture of some 17th century armors. Oh yes, this hat. For a very long time, this armor was thought to have belonged to a cardinal. Because this was in Spain from the 16th century onward. It was in Spain, and Philip IV of Spain, we're in the 1620s, had the brother called the Cardinal Infant of Spain, Ferdinand, and this armor at the time was thought to be a 17th century armor because the hat reminded the curators of a cardinal, but it has nothing to do with it. It's actually a civilian hat, and again, like the skirts. Why not? Why not make a fashionable hat out of metal if you can? And it's a powerful statement. We don't know of a single other helmet like this that was ever made.
I'm particularly fascinated by this armor. It seems almost unadorned. It's so sculptural just on the body.
Which is why it is here. It's a true work of sculpture. It almost looks like it's molded over the boy's body. It almost looks like it could be a wetsuit or something like that. And yet, the articulation is phenomenal. It doesn't interfere with the overall silhouette. We wish we knew what the arms and the head would have looked like. Other very interesting thing, so many visitors, not to this exhibition, they want to know about the functionality of these armors. They often ask about how people go to the bathroom. This is an armor that has an integral cod piece. It's not removable. When you put it on, you're in trouble.
Oh.
It's not clearly meant to be used in the foot combat. There's a beginning and an end.
Right.
It's not for everyday wear. But it also is making the point that it's a costume. It's close fitting and is sculpture, but the presence of the codpiece is just a fashion statement. It's what the male attire would look like in textile as well.
These are mind-blowing. I have literally never seen anything like this. Where do these are Maximilian's gauntlets?
We believe that they are because he's they come from the Habsburg armory, and there's only one person who would have this size and who lived at the time to have owned them, and it's Maximilian.
And where do these fall within his life? How old was he when these were made?
So these are completely confusing.
Oh.
Yes, they're shape-wise
Yeah.
and structure, they are Gothic, late Gothic, so maybe 1490 or so, which means then Maximilian would have been in his early 40s, late 30s, early 40s possibly. But what's so interesting is that they're also decorated with etching. Do you see how there's a wolf's head over the metacarpal lane?
Gosh, yes.
And then there's a floral decoration on the edges. So this kind of decoration normally surfaces in the 1530s, so 40 years later. And there's of course experimentation with etching earlier on. So are these the earliest example of this style? They are homogeneous, that is, the decoration goes with the gauntlets.
Right.
The way that these lames are cut, it's clear that they wanted to have a wolf's head.
Right.
And then the etching is original to the gauntlets. But is it possible that these gauntlets were made at a later time in Maximilian's time, but they are like historicizing and they're trying to look Gothic? That an armor was tasked with the goal of creating a relic, or an object that would have captured Maximilian in his prime? We don't know. What we do know is that Charles V owned them, and we believe that he removed them when he abdicated and moved to Spain. He took them with him as like souvenirs of what his grandfather was like, and which is why we're closing the show as the last night. There was a bit of a cult within the Habsburg family, and that's why we wanted them presented as regal objects on the pillow.
Amazing.
But I wish we knew more. They're bewildering. They're still. It's an opportunity to look at them very carefully and understand them better. That's certainly beautifully made.
I've been to so many exhibitions of armor, and I feel like this has widened my mind as in terms of the whole scope of the art of arms and armor. I really, it's a beautiful exhibition.
Well, thank you. I take it as a great compliment because I know how much you know about the subject and how much you have investigated.
Well, thank you so much. That was unbelievable. And it's open till January 5th, is that right?
That's correct, until January 5th.
Get yourself to the Met and come see this exhibition. If you have any interest in arms and armor, this is a really unique experience. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.